I'd like to call to order the February 12th meeting of the Shelby Township Planning Commission. I'll ask the acting secretary to call the roll, please.
Commissioner Dallo?
Here.
Commissioner DeSico?
Here.
Commissioner Wozniak?
Here.
Commissioner Apone?
Here.
Commissioner Turner?
Here.
Commissioner Moore is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
First item is the approval of the agenda. I'm going to remove election of the officers. Ms. Moore, when she indicates she wouldn't be here, made that request, and I think it appropriate. So with that change, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Moved by DeSico, support by Turner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have two sets of minutes to approve. The first from the January 8th meeting. If there are no corrections or additions.
So move.
Support.
Moved by Turner, support by DeSico. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next from the study meeting of January 15th.
So move.
Moved by DeSico.
Support.
Support by Pone. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, this evening we've got two primary items. The first being a petition for rezoning. This is a public hearing, so I'll request the secretary to read the notice that's published.
Charter Township of Shelby Notice of Public Hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Planning Commission for the Charter Township of Shelby, Macomb County, Michigan has received a request for approval of the following amendment to the zoning map. Applicant Anthony Penna, 25 Real Holding LLC, 38600 Van Dyke Suite 300, Sterling Heights, Michigan 48312. The rezoning request from R1, one family residential, and R1B, one family residential, to R1B, one family residential. The rezoning application includes a site plan for 129 residential units. The location is vacant land on the north side of 25 Mile Road and west of Shaner Road. Sidwell number 23-07-02-400-027, 23-07-02-400-029, and 23-07-02-400-034. The Planning Commission will meet on Monday, February 12, 2018 at 7 p.m. in the Shelby Municipal Building, 52700 Van Dyke, Shelby Township, Michigan, 586-726-7243, for the purpose of holding a public hearing on the conditional rezoning application. The application for a rezoning, zoning ordinance text, and zoning map may be examined at the Planning and Zoning Department in the municipal building Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 5 p.m. Written comments may be submitted to the Planning Commission at the above address prior to the meeting. Oral comments will be heard during the public hearing. This notice is provided pursuant to the requirements of Michigan Public Act 110 of 2006 as amended. Shelby Township Planning Commission, Jerome Moffitt, Chair, Raquel Moore, Secretary. 3 applicants, 9 utilities, and 40 property owners were notified by first-class mail on January 19, 2018.
Thank you. Mr. Kirk, did the publication meet all legal requirements?
Yes, it did.
Great, thank you. Were there, to the secretary, was there any correspondence regarding this request?
We did receive some correspondence from Ed and Becky Higbee. They are not in favor of the proposal due to density. And I think overall that's
Okay, this item was included in the board's package, so I think everyone had the opportunity to read it, and it'll be forwarded on if this does get referred on to the board for action. Okay, thank you. The format for this public hearing will be as follows: the petitioner or representative will come state what they're requesting and the reasons for it. Then the commissioners will ask questions of the petitioner. We'll then open this up to the public to ask questions to the board, who then will bring the representative back up to answer those questions. Again, this isn't a debate, but we'll do our best to make sure everyone's questions are answered as best as possible. So with that, if the petitioner's here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Epping. I appreciate being before you again. step back. I'm representing tonight Anthony Penna and his development group on the piece of property that we're referring to as Beacon Point. Beacon Point is located at the northwest corner of 25 Mile and Shana Road. I'll just step over and put up the board. Mr. Chairman, I realize this is a rezoning public hearing. We're going to be concurrently tying this to or applying for a plan unit development. So with your permission, I'll explain what our intention is in terms of development as it relates then to that rezoning.
If you think that's in your best interest, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Our land is currently zoned R1B and R1. We're requesting that all 58 acres be rezoned to R1, understanding that it is a two-part process, that at one point it would ideally be rezoned to R1, R1B, I should say, and then ultimately, if the board and the commission are in favor, after our various applications, that ideally a plan unit development would be approved for land development. What we're planning on doing is to develop a single-family neighborhood on this property. Our goal is to develop 129 single-family homes. Those homes will be approximately 2,300 square feet and probably sell for about $350,000 plus upgrades. Of what the homes would look like. The land is unique in the sense that it has very little actual road frontage from Shana or from 25 Mile. We do have access to both Shana and 25 Mile, but the lot, the 58 acres, is really essentially set behind the existing homes, behind the existing school. On Shana, Beacon Tree Elementary School is our neighbor. To the west, we have the ITC corridor. To the north, the Consumers Energy power easement, and to the south, a series of single-family large lot homes, as well as some frontage on 25 Mile. We think that the rezoning is an appropriate rezoning because it ties in my estimation, perfectly with your adopted master plan. The master plan looks at areas, sections 1 and 2, up in the northeast corner of Shelby Township, and requires or requests or mandates that a number of different things happen. That number one, there's a lot of beautiful natural features up there. We enjoy the Clinton River cutting through our parcel, and so the master plan talks about preserving those natural features as well as making them amenities to the township with walking trails and paths and so forth. We talks about through the public participation in the master plan, this idea of creating a variety of housing types, including smaller housing types. And so we think that the rezoning from R1 to R1B would allow us to be consistent with the master plan to provide that balance of open space and smaller variety of housing types. It also talks specifically about diverse housing, both in terms of empty nesters and young starter families, young singles. We think, frankly, our housing really will cover that entire market, right from rezoning to R1B would allow us to create those 2,300 square foot homes that would range from starter housing, family housing, all the way up to empty nesters. So we think that'll provide a full range for the township in terms of housing. The property is a little unusual in the sense that it's perhaps one of the most encumbered pieces of property in the township. We have the pink and white represents areas that really just are not buildable. The township is making a big effort, and we think a positive thing in terms of bringing sewer up to this area of the township. Mr. Penna and his team have participated in that discussions and in some of the conversations around creating an SAD, participating in SAD, and obviously we think that that's a good thing for the township to activate that corner of the township. The white line represents a proposed trajectory or layout of where that main trunk line is proposed to cut through the site from Shaner, cutting west towards the ITC, and then cutting north towards the top of the property and to points beyond this property in the north. The large pink areas on the west side represent the ITC corridor as well as that DTE underground gas storage facility. So those are our immediate neighbors to the west. To the north, that thin line is the consumer's power corridor. And then the large area across the bottom of the site is the middle branch of the Clinton River, as well as the floodplain and floodway. So of the 58 acres, a great deal of it is either unbuildable, able to be preserved in terms of a natural feature, or an immediate neighbor that is an unusual use. I say this because in terms of rezoning to R1B, the property really has and will have no neighbors. We do have, of course, the existing homes to the south that are immediately adjacent, or at least on the other side of the river. We have the school Beacon Tree to the east, but to the west, to the north, because of the utility quarters, we don't have any immediate adjacent residential or other neighbors. We have neighbors to the south in terms of nicely established single-family neighborhoods, Glen Oak and some other neighborhoods. What's interesting is those are zoned R1B, or at least were developed, it appears, under R1B zoning because their lot sizes are very, very similar to the lots that we're proposing on the southern end of our site. So along 25 Mile Road there, those lots in general south of 25 are approximately 130, 125 deep by about 80 or 90 feet. We're proposing in our development 16 lots that access off of 25, the only 16 lots that'll be south of the river, and those meet that same dimension, that 80 feet by 135. We think that our average actually averages out to be a little larger than their lots, but will be very, very similar neighbors and similar homes. Last plan is just a colored version of what I believe you have in your packets, and that's the layout that we are proposing for this R1B neighborhood. The road alignment is really dictated almost exclusively by the proposed sewer corridor, the trunk line. We've been working closely with the DPW, the various departments involved with water and sewer, and those roads really reflect exactly where those trunk lines will go. We know that we can build within the road right of way and have that access that entire area. As a result, of course, we're fairly limited in terms of our road alignment. We think it works out well. It completely tucks all proposed residential units well within the site. Other than those 16 lots on the southern side and a few right out by the school, I think most people will drive by this neighborhood and not even realize that there's these high-quality homes back in there. So we think it's an appropriate use of the site. We know that part of the land is already zoned R1B. We are not proposing any multiple family. They'll all be large single-family homes. And as I said, it appears to be, at least in my estimation, very, very consistent with your master plan. So for that reason, we would appreciate recommendation for rezoning.
So an R1B neighborhood with 60 by 125 foot lots.
Correct. Which again is consistent, I think, with the master plan. The master plan talks about a wide range of housing types that really, in fact, I just was in your neighbor to the south today, and we're talking about how zoning ordinances really haven't caught up with housing needs. So many people, especially those young families or empty nesters, as the master plan points out, just don't want these acre lots, and the idea of bringing sewer to an area like this allows the township to activate those. So we're able to comfortably put a 2,300 square foot home on a 60-foot lot, have good backyards, have open space throughout the neighborhood. So yeah, we think it's completely appropriate, things that we've seen in other parts of the township and other areas.
As I view this, and my board members may argue differently, and these are two separate issues. Okay, the first one is R1, R1B, rezone to R1B, which I guess I envision it to be a little bit different than 60 by 120-foot lots, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
And so really, I think the first question is it in the township's best interest to standardize the zoning of that parcel, one? And then we'll get on to what you may be proposing in the next item we have on our agenda.
Understood.
So I'll turn it to the board with any questions on the zoning. If that's agreeable to everybody, then we'll just deal with the zoning first, and then we'll deal with
Site
what you're
plan.
proposing separately.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Turner.
I also would agree that if we unify the zoning under R1B, that seems to make sense. I do understand the idea about mixed residential use. We'll talk about the site plan in a little bit, but I can see the justification for going to an R1B zoning if that's what we actually get is an R1B plan. But so that's where I stand on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Moffett, I support your position.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. I want you to sit down for a second, and I'm sure, bring you back up. This is the only public hearing the Planning Commission will hold on this rezoning request. Your remarks will be entered into the record for Township Board evaluation. The Planning Commission is a recommending body. Ultimately, the Township Board will take into consideration comments that are made this evening and will make the final decision on this rezoning. At this point, anyone is free to come and offer your opinion, ask any questions. We need your name and your address for the record. And again, we're not debating right now, so just ask the questions. I'll make notes, and we'll do our best to get answers for you. Sorry, you need to come up to the microphone, yeah. And then when you're done speaking, there's a sign-in sheet. You sign in.
Scott Linenfelser, 13095 25 Mile, property just east of this development. Just what is R1 versus R1B? I mean, I understand there's a plan. But
Sure, Mr. Nguyen.
The R1 designation would require a 30,000 square foot lot, 120 feet wide. The R1B would require 90 foot wide lot, 14,400 square feet in area. Those are the standards in those two zoning districts.
14,000 for R1B,
14,400.
30,000 for R1.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Richard Folks, 56017 Shaner Road, right next to the school. One question I have is, here, I'll pass this.
Hang on a second. You can take the microphone if you need to travel. Should be good.
Test.
Yep.
One question I have is that I'm the big blue house right here next to the school. Is this a pathway that it goes into the school, and what is this green line? What the clarification of that line is?
Yeah, that's probably the second half when they talk about
Okay.
what they want to propose, but just so you know.
Yeah, and then on record,
You can
so I
just
don't
give
get
that to
feedback,
me.
is I'm against the R1B.
Okay, give that to me and go back to the microphone and you're good.
The R1B, I think, unless you guys can get closer to the 90 foot wide to 100 foot wide-ish, I mean, cutting those lots in half, you just basically described as taking the square footage and cutting it in half from R1B to R1. And I think that should be a serious decision. I think it could be a step back. I understand the situation. I personally don't have an issue with a split type of community because there's going to be good locations and not so good locations. But that's my opinion.
Okay. Sir, can you sign in? And then, sir, I think did you sign in too? Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Evening. My name is Bill Burrows, 56301 Shaner Road. I am a couple lots down further from this, but I just went through a lot of hoopla with across the street and the 1,200 homes coming there and another 100 and so homes here. I wondered if there's any consideration for the amount of traffic that's going to be there. As I went through the property across the street, there's no road commission involved. There's nobody to take in any consideration, and it was quite a big feature that we all had concerns about at that time. So now we're adding even more, and I understand this is progress and everything, and everybody wants to jam these little units in there. We're going to have thousands of people trying to get out with a school. I really have some thoughts about the children, the school buses. It's going to get quite active in the area. And I know it's handled throughout the township, but I think being a county road, it's got to be at least kept up or widened maybe. Or and I see an entrance exit off of Shaner.
Okay, right now we're just talking about.
Just planning.
Just
Okay.
the zoning, so.
I also agree with the R1, R1B. It's, I understand it's conducive for everybody else except for the people who are here that have the property and acreage and stuff like that. But I had to say something. That's my feelings.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
You could sign in. Mr. Nguyen, isn't Shaner, expanding Shaner to 5 lanes from 23 to 26? Like that?
Well, it's on our capital improvement plan, and it's something we're working with the county on, but
hasn't been.
no, we haven't, no decision's been made on that. And just for the record, the Lombardo project's never been approved.
Exactly, but I mean, here we all are, and this is my concern.
It's a fair concern, but let's just be realistic. Nothing's been approved yet. And that's one of the concerns we had, is how that's going to be addressed and what impact they're going to have and what responsibility they should have in fixing it. So, to be continued.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, everyone. My name is Joseph LaPiccolo, and I live on Shaner, 56089 Shaner Road, and I'm right next to the gas easement. Now, we're on 5 acres. The builders want to come in and build a house on a very small lot. Shelby Township's not that way. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to build little houses, or big houses on little lots. So I disagree with the rezoning for that reason.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
My name is Brad Lipinitis. I'm from 54893 Glen Oaks subdivision, Glen Oaks Drive. And I'd rather have the zoning to stay the same, again, because I think the community needs bigger houses. I think it fits the area better. You can go right down 25 Mile, everything's 100 feet almost, 80 to 120 feet. You get the 60-foot lots, and they're nothing against them building. I mean, I'm sure they're great builders and everything, but even looking at the specs of the homes, they look kind of cookie cutter to me. They look like a kind of Macomb Township type home. No, not against Macomb Township, but I kind of want the area to look bigger and bolder for home values, things like that. That's
Well,
what I'm
this
thinking about.
doesn't get them to 60 foot.
What's that?
What we're dealing with right now doesn't get them to 60 foot.
Right, I understand. You're kind of getting, they're proposing a 60-foot
We'll
line.
get to that when we get to that.
Right.
But right now it's a property that's has a kind of a split zoning. Does it make sense given pretty much that everything else is in the area, what else is in the area, to change it or not to change it, and that's what we're going to consider.
But if it ends up being a 60-foot lots, the homes would kind of be what he's showing, right? So it's kind of,
I don't, we'll get to that when we get to that.
all right,
But
thank
right
you.
now,
I'm for the 120-foot lots,
okay,
the old zoning. Thank you.
thank you. Sir, could you sign in, please? Sir? Yeah. Yeah, there's a woman that usually sits where Mr. Nguyen is, and she gets mean, so. All right, does anyone else wish to comment? Going twice, 3 times? Okay, back to the board. Mr. Nguyen, your thoughts?
You want to just start just with the zoning thoughts?
Yeah, just zoning. and
Okay,
then we'll-
so
yeah.
the request is to rezone the property. The property south of the river, between the river and 25, is zoned R1B. North of the river is where it's zoned R1. So the theory was, I think, when you looked at the last plan and this plan, was that when you have no sanitary sewer in that area, the large 30,000 square foot lots make sense. Bringing the sewer in, then, bringing it to R1B standard would there'd be some logic to that. And the logic is now you have a 90-foot wide lot, which is wider than you have even in Glen Oaks. Those are 80-footers typically. So the 90-foot lots, the R1B is a higher standard in that area. So that, didn't necessarily have a problem with that. So there's two parts of the plan that I think are relevant. One of the elements of the plan was to preserve natural resources. One of the other ones was to diversify housing. And you see there's, as Mr. Epping explained, there's some unique physical features on the site. And there are some needs for some other types of housing in the area. I think where there's a misalignment here, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit, is that the plan doesn't really match the R1B, nor is the plan aligned with the master plan recommendations. So the rezoning, in a broad sense, makes some sense because 90-foot lots is the most common development standard. It's where the plan doesn't align itself with that, not with the rezoning, not with the master plan. And the challenge is where we allow smaller lots, it's usually done in trade-off with some additional open space. Where here we're getting largely open space that they can't use anyways, and some of that open space, as I'll get to with my other comments, isn't particularly well designed. So there are some flaws with that open space. I don't think we want to accept that. So in terms of the rezoning, I'm supportive of that, but I do have some substantial problems with the plan.
Okay. I mean, that's why I kind of wanted to separate them, and we'll get to that. All right. To the board, any questions?
Question for Mr. Nguyen. So the R1B is a required 90-foot width?
Absolutely.
Would we have to talk about that at all? It's 90 foot and that's it?
Well, unless you approve a plan along with it that has something, the PUD allows you to adjust those lot sizes, as you well know. And there's a trade-off and a negotiation. I guess the trade-off is, do we get a better design here? And I'm not sure I'm not comfortable that we have.
Right. I don't think we've got to a position where we can trade off yet.
Right. No, I don't think so either. I guess the question is, you want to link these together or do you want to pull them apart? And I think they've chosen to put them together. And if they put them together, I don't think you can approve them both at the same time.
Right. I agree with you. Thank you.
Okay. Does it make sense to postpone making even a decision on the rezoning until we know what
Yes.
what's being,
And I think Mr. Epping's kind of shown that proposal somewhat.
Oh yeah, no, we've seen it. We all have.
If you want me to maybe jump into some of those comments, I'd be happy to.
Sure.
They kind of, I think we've heard the residents. I think the concerns are the smaller lots, and I want to put a little finer point on those comments in terms of how this design impacts that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nguyen.
No,
Mr.
I
Chairman.
didn't recognize you, so
Thank you.
it's to Mr. Nguyen.
So just in terms of the site plan, because we can't take it away from the rezoning since it's been submitted that way, there are some design areas where I think this plan falls apart at. When you see the road that crosses from Shana that goes west and crosses the floodplain, if you look at your plans, you can see that's all shaded. That means it's a floodplain. Now, Mr. Penna has received some comments from an environmental consultant that suggests that those physical limitations can be overcome through engineering. I guess my question is, do we want to overcome those things? The floodplain was put there for a reason. It's a sensitive area. Obviously, the sanitary sewer has to cross it. But I think there's some lots in that area that are vulnerable to, not being really good lots or having some problems in the future because they have to fill that, and there's some topography there that my feeling is we should leave that area alone and not build on it. You have a similar issue in the southern area where you have that cul-de-sac that goes north from 25 Mile Road. If you look at the topography, lots 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, and 12 have significant topography. Now, that would work good if the lot was 30,000 square feet. When you have a lot that's maybe 10,000 square feet, trying to put a house on that is really difficult. I talked to one of the building officials who's responsible for doing plan reviews. He said, please don't approve a lot like that. So I think those are some issues that have to be overcome. If you look at the open space areas that's outside of floodplains and wetlands, it's really limited. It's not really high-value open space. You have an interior path that's along the back of several of those lots along the river, which has no privacy. The goal of the master plan is put a trail along the river. You know, we've taken advantage of that in this community very effectively in Riverbends Park. This would be another opportunity. Let's put the trail where it does the most good. There are some of the department comments I think are particularly relevant. Our engineer and our building director suggested there's a sidewalk along Shana Road. It doesn't cross the river. So that's the applicant's responsibility to get that across somehow. They've also, the building department and the fire department and the Department of Roads have asked for temporary turnarounds at the end of Sutter Drive and Connor Drive, which will affect those lots. And finally, the fire department's asked for a second emergency access road, and I don't know how you get that in this case. They are showing a stub street to the north, which would eventually connect with that property to the north and go to 26 Mile Road. But the stub street to the west, to the ITC corridor, seems foolish to me. I mean, you're not going to cross the ITC corridor. There's situations where you can cross the corridor, but if you look at the lots in that area, it makes no sense to cross. It wouldn't go anywhere. You have a cemetery over there and some other large lots, so the practicality of that ever happening is slim to none. So I think there's a lot of design flaws with this plan that need to be overcome, and I'm nowhere close to feeling comfortable recommending that we tie this together to the rezoning.
Okay.
There hasn't been sufficient compromise or trade-off to make me feel comfortable with the smaller lots.
So would you recommend holding off on the rezoning?
Yes.
Until?
Yeah. It has to go to the board. I talked to Mr. Wozniak about this today. You have both these go to the board, and I wouldn't want to do them separately because they're out of context. I mean, I offer the recommendation for rezoning to reflect, I think that makes sense, but I don't think I'd want to explain one to the board without having them both together as companion cases.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wynn, I'll ask the gorilla question. You're recommending postponement rather than denial?
Yes, only to give them a chance to see if they can fix it. I think
Gotta
that's
be
fair.
asked.
What?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Epping?
I'm happy to answer any of the citizens'
Citizens' questions, I think we sort of
pretty straightforward.
addressed.
As it relates to the rezoning, I mean, you know, I've enjoyed coming to your township for decades, and certainly plan on coming back for another several decades. What we've tried to do tonight is to be very transparent, to show you the intention to develop a single-family neighborhood. Certainly, we've got Mr. Penna, myself, we've got a record of working with you, and so I think we can look at those site plan issues. And the site is constrained by so many different facts that just are part of that land, as well as probably the most cumbersome is that trunk line, which again we're trying to cooperate with the entire community. But we do believe that the plan, certainly we can take a closer look at it, but we do believe that single-family neighborhood is appropriate. R1B is appropriate based on the master plan. The master plan calls for even attached housing or mixed housing. So we think that there is a case in the community as well as within the master plan to get to smaller lots. That being said, I know that that's for another night. We would request, just so that we can get moving, or at least move ahead and know that we're at least somewhat in the right direction, we would request that if you consider tonight a recommendation for rezoning with the condition that it doesn't go to the board until we have an entire site plan package for you. That way that we know that at least we're working with the community, we're heading towards that R1B. It doesn't go into effect until the board sees it, and we would condition that based on getting to the point where we work with you and get a favorable recommendation on a site plan.
Okay. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Support.
Moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Our decision this evening must be based on the following: the practicality of this rezoning request and the effect on the surrounding area, the owner's right to use his land, do current growth and development patterns warrant this rezoning, and is the proposed rezoning in accordance with the master plan? Before I ask for a motion, I guess my preference would be to table this So the decisions even though I had sort of initially, I will cede somewhat to the planner's argument that I think we're better off. It was brought to us sort of a dual application, and I think we need to kind of proceed likewise. So, any comments from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion?
To
I would postpone the preliminary applications to give the applicant an opportunity to address all the open space and transitional designs issues identified by the Planning and Zoning Department.
Is there support?
Support.
Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Commissioner Wozniak?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Pone?
Yes.
Commissioner Dalu?
Yes.
Commissioner DeSico?
Yes.
Commissioner Casale?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, so next item, and I think you guys want to go through, I mean, it's,
I think that just has a motion
oh,
for
did you,
both.
oh, did you?
It's all in one.
I think it was all in one.
Right,
all in one.
What's that? My mistake. Okay. All right, so we've now sort of put both the requests together, and now we've postponed them for them to come back with some adjustments to what. And so anyone who was noticed, anyone who signed in, and if you didn't get a notice and just heard about this, make sure you sign in, and you'll get notice to the next meeting.
You can take it outside if you want. Just leave it on the counter out there. We'll be happy to notify anybody again.
Are we able to ask a couple questions, make a couple points?
Jay, would you mind taking,
Not the zoning, but I mean, in the spirit of them coming back and looking at.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I jumped out of my seat there just to once again claim a unanimous vote at the Planning Commission. Not the right direction, though. But that being said, it would be helpful for us to hear from the community as well as the commission. We heard from some of you, but the more specific feedback, and we certainly got some, but the more specific feedback, the more targeted we can be.
okay. I'll tell you, we've kind of have moved on from this, so I don't know that I can, but if you wouldn't mind maybe listening to the neighbors.
Talk to them out there.
Yeah, on the back. So I'll pause a moment if you guys want to go back, whoever wants to go and have.
Mr. Chairman, just before Mr. Epping and Mr. Penna leave, you guys are really creative and very experienced. I think you're going to be able to do something with this piece and make it really nice for us. So, well, I know you guys can. So,
The lobby conference, the lower level conference room is probably open. You can go downstairs.
If you want to ask any specific questions or offer your comments, now is a great opportunity. So, and they're actually nice guys, even though we yell at them. Planning director's report.
Two things tonight, or actually a couple things. We just, in terms of our monthly approval process, January is the big month for signs. We had 35 sign applications last month, which a lot of extra work. Then we wanted to present the annual report tonight, just to summarize it. We're required by state law to prepare a report to the board. It covers all the planning department functions. Last year, we had 395 applications in the process. That's 8-year high. It's been going up every year, and that's really our core function, is preparing for these meetings, the board, and the Board of Zoning Appeals. The master plan was completed last year. We do have a function in our department to administer the county's community development block grant program. We did some sidewalk projects last year, landscaping on Auburn Road. Along with the building department, we established this blight initiative, and you can see there's quite a few sites that were cleaned up the last couple of years through that process. We're also involved with the capital improvement program and coordinating that with the board and financial management. And tonight, somebody raised the question of Shaner sidewalks, and this week on Wednesday, I'm meeting with the road department officials so we can coordinate what we're doing in terms of road improvements with the county, so that we can look longer range and plan for how we can do that. That top 10 priorities that you see on the wall there, that initiative is coordinated through our department along with the department, all the other department heads, the board, and the public. We have a much more robust GIS system now, thanks in large part to Scott's effort. If you look at our website, you'll see a lot more information portrayed graphically, helpful to the commission members and residents. Last week, the board adopted or introduced the adoption of the new clear zoning format. So end of the month, it will be in effect and available online. There's a lot. We did a lot more of this last year, and I guess to me, the large credit goes to Julie and Scott. I mean, they've contributed to all those projects I mentioned. There's a higher degree of department efficiency due to their contribution. So, get these agenda packages out early. It takes everybody to do that. And Julie makes sure, she says, let's get the agenda packages out even earlier if we can. So both of their positions have been upgraded for this year in anticipation of my departure sometime next year. So I appreciate the board's effort doing that in HR. So we made a lot of progress this year. A lot more fun than I've had in a long time.
Wonderful.
So we'd ask you a motion to pass this on to the board.
Okay, is there
There's
someone to make that motion?
Chairman?
Mr. Turner?
I move to accept the Planning and Zoning Department's annual report for 2017 and forward the report to the Board of Trustees for their consideration.
Support.
Moved by Turner, support by Pone. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Last item was, you saw that the plan I gave you for the Stony Creek Cove, where we approved the site plan. They found out afterwards that there's a utility line runs through there. It cost like $400,000 to move it. And so Urban Land came back with a revised plan. Doesn't change, it changes the layout, doesn't change the yield. And it meets all the requirements. If you had no objections, I'd approve that administratively.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, you have your answer.
Thank you. That's it.
That's it?
That's it. Motion to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.